Good morning. This is Georgie Ann Bailey. I'm the Executive Director for AIA New York State, and I'd like to welcome you to our 2014 Lobby Day webinar. I think this is probably the fourth or fifth year that we've conducted these webinars. We have, after we always survey our members, and our members say, do it again next year. So we're back again this year. I'd like to thank all of our participants for taking the time to join us today as we head into the home stretch for Lobby Day preparations. This annual webinar really provides a great opportunity for us and for you to discuss the importance of grassroots advocacy, highlight our legislative priorities, and also provide tips for holding successful meetings when you come to Albany. This year's moderator will be our Vice President of Government Advocacy, Jeff Murrell, AIA. You should know Jeff is a member of the Eastern New York chapter. Our Legislative Counsel, Richard Leckerling, will walk us through our 2014 AIA New York State legislative agenda and provide some best practices for getting the value out of your meetings also. While I'm thinking of it, if you would just mute your line while the presentation is being given, and that will help to eliminate any background noise that you may have. You'll be able to ask questions when you're prompted, and you can unmute your lines then. I'd now like to introduce, I'm going to turn this program over to Jeff Murrell. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Georgie, and good morning, everyone. I'm really excited that all of you are here and coming to Lobby Day. Whenever I talk to members about coming to Lobby Day, most architects I know get a green look on their face and act as if they would rather spend an entire day in a dentist chair rather than spend a single hour talking to a politician. But what I try to help people understand is that there are some ways in which legislators are a lot like architects, and they're like us in this way. There is no way that a single legislator can know everything they need to know about every issue that comes across their desk. And so they rely heavily on expert consultants, just like we do. And so what we are doing with events like Lobby Day and other meetings in your legislators' offices in their home district is that we are trying to build relationships with the legislators and with their staff so that way when they face issues related to the design and construction industry, we become the experts that they want to call. With that, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker today, Adam Mellis. Adam is the Director of Political Affairs and Engagement for AIA National. And what that means is that he's responsible for coordinating and organizing all of our various national lobbying programs and activities. Adam comes from a long line of architects. His mother was an architect and an AIA member. His grandfather was an architect and an AIA member. And his family was so committed to the AIA that they raised Adam in Lower Manhattan right across the street from a toy store that would one day become the Center for Architecture of AIA New York. I think that displays a level of intergenerational commitment to the AIA that does us all proud. Adam, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to offer one small correction. While my grandfather was a member, my mother still is, and part of the reason why she joined was my grandfather hosted the annual picnic for the AIA Detroit chapter, and my mother just had too much of a good time at that party. So just wanted to add that in there.
Adam, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to describe your mother in the past tense.
It's okay.
So, Adam, in your opinion, what is the overall value a member gets from attending Lobby Day?
You know, I will say this: the value can be seen, at least by me, on the reaction to members' faces when they stand up and take their profession and their career in hand and really sort of, you know, demonstrate to those elected officials and those policymakers that, you know, here's a group of constituents who represent, you know, other constituents and are real experts, not just in, how the design and construction process happens, but also experts in their community and what makes those communities so vibrant. And the real value that I've always seen is, knowing that from the elected official side and knowing that elected officials are looking to find out what constituents have to say, and really knowing that there's there's a group of professionals that are doing some amazing things, that matters. So, it really, you may not feel it while you're in that meeting, but the results continue to pay off every time.
So, Adam, why are these lobby days so important to our profession?
They're very important to the profession because who else is going to do it? It's important for this profession to really lead what happens to this profession. You can't rely on the contractors to do what's right for the architects all the time. You can't rely on the engineers to do what's right for architects all the time. You can't rely on the lawyers and the accountants and whoever. Now, they all may be partners on a variety of issues. Certainly, we partner with a lot of those groups that I mentioned earlier on, such as the engineers and the contractors. But if you're not speaking for your own profession, then somebody else is. And I think that just says it all.
Adam, I think it's a great point. It's a point I often make to other members, that if we don't, as you said, if we don't speak up and voice our concerns about our profession to our elected officials, someone else will, and we won't like what happens when they do. Adam, in your opinion, what are the paramount do's and don'ts when holding a meeting with a legislator?
I could certainly start with the do's because they're very positive. Have a good time. Enjoy the fact that you're there. Nothing is more painful to be in a meeting with a constituent or with somebody else when they just don't want to be there and it doesn't work well. Make sure that you personalize the story. Make sure that you connect it to your practice, your community, as much as you can. And if you can't, try to identify somebody who you can connect with. One of the issues that we work on, we presented at Grassroots this past year is a bill called the National Design Services Act, or the NDSA, and this is a bill related to emerging professionals and student loans, but also related to helping underserved communities. And what I've often expressed is, whoever has the most student loan debt, they should be the one who starts the conversation, and whoever has the most experience in working in an underserved community should finish the conversation, because ultimately it's something that you're really showing not just sort of the personal effect on the constituent, but you're showing the benefit that the solution will have to the community. The other do, I would say, is make sure you follow up and make sure that you don't you don't over-represent yourself. If you don't know the answer, say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you, and then make sure you do get back to them. And certainly you and Georgianne and Mike can help with the follow-up, but ultimately you are the one in the meeting and you're the one building that relationship. So make sure that you're part of that, response. Don't just leave it up to, the professional staff to get back to them. The legislator wants to hear from you.
Right, Adam. It's really important to follow up, and it's really important for the members who are members of the legislator's district to follow up. Now,
exactly.
My wife spent 10 years as a legislative staffer here in Albany, and she tells me before every lobby day that one of the best ways to follow up is to bring a camera and ask to get your picture taken with the assembly person or senator. and then send that picture back to their staff office, because they'll post it on their website, they'll post it in their office. The legislators love those things, and that's a great way to follow up and be remembered.
And I would say that somebody, we're always looking for pictures of AIA members meeting with elected officials. So certainly share them with me as well. I'd say the other sort of on the don't side, don't talk about the election, don't talk about money, don't talk about supporting or not supporting somebody running for office. That's not what you're there to do. This is purely about the legislation and the issues at hand. Certainly there's sort of the in the back of their head, will this constituency help me? But ultimately, campaigns and legislative action, even in New York, are separate. And so I would really express, if you want to end a meeting with an elected official really quick, just say, hey, do this or we won't support you in re-election. That meeting's over. They don't want your support because they get more negative press than they would positive press. So I would really stay away from that, and don't be disrespectful. Respect the office. Even the freshman assembly member who's never served in office before ran for that office and was elected, and that's easier said than done. And so respect the office. Understand that every member of the assembly, has a vote, and the assembly members, heck, even the U.S. Congress, they talk with each other regardless of political party, and get to know, try to get to know each other. Their staff really do know each other quite well, and so just keep in mind that be respectful of the office while you're there.
Adam, are there any particular do's and don'ts for when you're done with the meeting and you leave the official's office?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, don't leave the office and say, God, that was terrible. Don't, just sort of, be respectful the entire time. And again, follow up. And the other thing I'd say is, besides taking pictures and sending it back to them, do try to set up your next meeting. Assemblyman or senator, as you're finishing your conversation, what can we do to have you at one of our chapter meetings? Or how can, I get you to come visit my firm? Or how can I get you to visit this job site where I can reinforce some of the things that we just spoke about and why, these particular issues are so important. Ultimately, you get more time, and politicians love one thing, and that's being in front of constituents. Give them a camera in front of potential voters, and they'll do it. And so, certainly, think about those future opportunities as you look during the course of the year.
Yeah, Adam, that's a really good point. All the staff does know each other. So I always think it's a good idea to just be very discreet when you're in the Capitol and when I'm in the legislative office building, because you never know who you're standing next to in the elevator or walking on the stairs or even just down the hall. So as tempting as it might be to sometimes start to debrief and say some positive or negative things about what just happened in the office, just because you leave the office doesn't mean there aren't people who aren't going to hear you.
Yeah. I'll tell you just a quick anecdote. A few years ago for the National Grassroots Conference, there was a group of AIA members from, I believe, New Jersey, and they were having lunch in the Longworth cafeteria. And somebody comes by and sits at the table next to them, and he overhears the conversation. And he was with a member of their staff, and his staff, and it was a congressman from Tennessee. And the congressman from Tennessee's like, yeah, I meet with architects later today, so this is what you're going to be talking about. And so here are these New Jersey architects presenting to a congressman in Tennessee, the various issue asks, so that when the Tennessee members went to that guy's office, he's like, yeah, I already heard about this stuff from these folks in New Jersey. What's it mean to us in Tennessee? And so I think, again, it was just they were just sitting there having lunch in the cafeteria. So,
Adam, sometimes when members schedule these appointments for a lobby day, they actually get to meet with staff instead of the legislator because legislature's in session, and so they're there doing their job over in the Senate or the Assembly chambers. What are the different dynamics they should expect if they meet with a legislator versus a staff member?
Yeah, not knowing too much of the details on the New York state legislature staff, I'll say this though, and in the respect of sort of looking at congressional staff, staff has a bit more time to be more of a policy expert on various issues, and really good staff will try to, when they find the time, get to know what AIA members that they're going to be meeting with are coming to talk with them about, or get an idea of what AIA members have asked for in the past, so they can already sort of get an idea of perspective. Meeting with a staff person as an elected official, and when I worked for the city of Anaheim as the assistant to the mayor, when somebody was meeting with me to share information about what was happening, the good meetings were the ones where they treated me like an extension of the mayor, and that, as the staff person, I was able to really sort of communicate exactly what they wanted, why they wanted it, and what was trying to be achieved. Whereas there were meetings where basically, you tell your boss this and you tell your boss that, we weren't able to have the conversation because it was already, at a point where it was aggressive and it was order, it was just orders given. I wasn't able to get the context of why they wanted something, whereas getting that context helped me communicate it to the boss.
Adam, many of our members have inquired about letter writing campaigns in support of our priorities. What are the tools that the AIA has that can help us do that?
Yeah, we have a number of tools available. One of which is the AIA Advocacy Center, and many of you may be familiar with it already by responding to some of the national action alerts or even New York State action alerts in the past. One of the values of especially the state legislative level, where the volumes of letters are still relatively low compared to a congressional level. One of the values is that a lot of these offices are able to now do keyword searches, and so if a particular issue is sort of come up, they can really sort of sort through by keyword searches to see what constituents and what constituencies have a stake on a particular issue. With that said, certainly writing a letter in many respects is the introduction. Those of you who are going to be in Albany for this legislative day, that's much more, has a greater value, at least as you look at surveys. If you're a member of Congress or a member of the legislature and you don't have an opinion on an issue, a lot of times what is said is face-to-face meetings will are stronger than phone calls, which are stronger than emails. But what is weaker than all of them? Not doing anything. So it certainly is important to express the viewpoints in some format or another.
Well, Adam, thanks for your insights there.
Oh, you're welcome.
Our next guest speaker is Christina Finkenhofer. Christina is the Director of Federal Relations for AIA National. And what that means is that Christina is one of the 3 full-time lobbyists AIA National has on staff. After law school, Christina did a tour of duty for Congresswoman Clark's office, where she got a front row seat to all the screaming protesters in the halls of Congress when the Affordable Care Act was being debated and passed. And that has done really well to prepare her for motherhood.
It certainly has.
But these days, Christina's extracurricular activities are pretty much limited to the fitness workout she gets chasing her little boy around the house.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Same kind of dynamic though. Congress and 8-year-old little boy, and same kind of deal there.
Well, Christina, thank you for joining us today. She's going to provide us with an update about the federal tax policy, how grassroots efforts are helping the AIA get its message to Congress. So, Christina?
Yes, absolutely. So this conversation is very timely because we have a great example on the national federal level of how grassroots lobbying directly affected one of our key issues. So back in March, we had our National Grassroots Hill Day where we had leaders from across the nation fly in and actually go visit with their members of Congress and present 3 issues. One of those issues was related to the energy efficient commercial building deduction, otherwise known as 179D. And this deduction is a key issue for many architects who do work for schools and other public buildings, et cetera. So this deduction is actually currently expired. So one of our key asks, going in, making sure the offices were familiar with this deduction, making sure they knew that it does a lot of good work for the communities, also on the state and local level and the federal level, and this is something that's very important and should be extended. Well, only a few weeks after, earlier this month, the Senate decided, hey, we're going to take a look at these expired tax provisions and decide whether, they should be extended or not. And when the chairman introduced his version of what should be extended, 179D was not among them. So what we did was we send out alert to all of our folks, number one, the folks that were just there for the Grassroots Hill Day, and worked with other folks in leadership to make sure we got folks to directly call their members of Congress and to say, hey, we were just in town just a few weeks ago. This is one of our key priorities. This tax deduction is extremely important, and it needs to be extended. And only 2 days after those 2 days of calls and letter writing and outreach, the chairman released his second version of what he thinks should be extended, and 179D was among those. And it went before the committee, and the committee approved all of it. And that was a direct result of the action of AIA members vouching for a provision that is important to their profession.
Christina, thanks for sharing that. That's great to hear because I know for myself so often it feels like any of these campaigns are just falling on deaf ears. So it's great to see that sometimes what we do actually does make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Christina, a lot of our members have expressed concern about the expiration of the federal historic tax credit and the new markets tax credit. Can you tell us what's going on with those?
Sure. So right now on national federal tax policy, there are 2 concurring things that are happening. One is Congress is realizing that there are a lot of tax provisions that are expired, and they have to figure out what to do with them. However, at the same time, the leaders of the tax writing committees want to do tax reform. And what that means is that they want to basically gut the tax code, lower the rates all around, and get rid of these small little expiring provisions and these little carve-outs in favor for an all-around lower rate. And that's the debate that's going on right now. How do you do that, number one? Number two, what do you do with these expiring provisions in the meantime? And number three, for the folks who, for example, architects who rely on the historic tax credit to get work done, what does getting rid of this tax credit mean to their profession, to their business, to their bottom line? Because for many businesses, although a lower rate would be favorable, they feel that a lot of these tax credits really generate business. And without that incentive, some of this work might not happen. And that's the debate that's actually going on right now, and that AIA is, on the national level, is really keyed into, and we are actually leading a coalition of design and construction organizations and allied groups to make sure that all of our bases are covered, that we make sure we're covering what's most important to the profession. So with that said, Dave Camp has released a draft. It's only a draft. Right now there is no legislative language relating to it, but his draft does get rid of the historic tax credit. My understanding is the new market tax credit would be preserved in his draft. So the only real threat here among those two would be to the historic tax credit, which we are working very closely with, components and the Historic Resources Committee, the knowledge community that deals with historic preservation issues. Adam, myself, the national team are working closely with them to make sure that we have a grassroots approach to preserving this credit. Because once again, as I highlighted before, it's a tried and true practice. This is the best way to really convey to legislators how important a provision is. So we're working closely. Adam, in his masterful way, has created a grassroots advocacy plan, and we are working with component by component to make sure that we identify key legislators, folks who we have to make sure we get in and talk to and convey to them how important this credit is. And number two, working with them to identify projects on the district level that we could highlight to say, hey, this is in your backyard, and this structure benefited from this tax credit. And without this tax credit, this structure wouldn't be in use. This community center wouldn't be here. This cultural center wouldn't be here but for this tax credit. And so organizing, it's just the key of organizing, getting together, getting firms who do this work in front of their legislators with key examples from the district. And, over the next year, we're going to make sure those meetings happen both in D.C. and at home in the district. And so that's a key priority for AIA National for the coming year. One thing I will say is that tax reform is not happening this year. So we do have some time. And so for the time that we have, we want to make sure that this grassroots approach is in place. And, we're happy. Whoever does have specific concerns about that, we're working closely with Mike on this issue and want to make sure that you guys can become involved in New York and make sure that you can voice your concerns appropriately there.
Thanks, Christina. At this point, I'd like to open up the phones to the members who are on the webinar and see if anyone has questions for Adam or Christina. Okay, then. Well, Adam and Christina, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great, thank you. We're now going to turn to the presentation of the 2014 AIA New York State Legislative Agenda, which is going to be given by Rich Leckerling, our Legislative Counsel. Rich, many of you know, for those of you who don't know, Rich is the co-managing partner of Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna, and he is the coordinating partner of his firm's Governmental Relations Practice Group. He specializes in representing clients of his, including ourselves, before the New York State Legislature, the executive branch, and other state agencies in regard to a broad array of issues before state government. What this means is that, in Albany at least, Rich is a big deal, but he's our big deal. And we're really glad that he's on our side and that we have him here working with us. So with that, Rich, would you like to walk us through our legislative agenda for the year?
Sure, Jeff. Thank you for that introduction. I think that's the first time I've ever been called a big deal, but I appreciate it. A couple other things I wanted to touch on before I get started. Kate Herlihy and Aggie Leahy of my office are on the phone too. So if I go astray, I'm urging both the two of them to correct me on the record here or to add anything that I'm missing. So just so that we paint a complete picture of what we want to accomplish on Lobby Day. Lobby Day is incredibly perfectly timed this year. It's on the 29th of April, which is the first Lobby Day where the legislators are back from their legislative recess. They completed the state budget on time before April 1st and then took a good part of the month of April in recess, and now they are back for what is essentially a 2-month substantive session when most of the issues that we care about will be addressed. So the timing of this is perfect. They're rested. Many of them will be tanned from their various vacations in and around. They'll be in a relatively good mood because they haven't been worn down by the legislative session. So I think it's a good time to hit the building. The building will be incredibly packed that day because a lot of groups have decided to try to hit them early in the substantive part of the session. So we'll be contending with all different kinds of groups who will be in the building. I want to touch on a couple of points that Adam made in his presentation. Most importantly, stay positive in these meetings, stay respectful. The most important part of what you're doing is not so much the message that I'm going to try to give you a guided tour of, but it's the fact that you're in Albany, that you're there, that you cared enough about the issues that you're presenting to them, that you took a day away from your practice and away from your offices to come talk to them. It gets their attention, and there's no other way to get their attention but to do that. Then you have to follow up back in the district with all of the members. The other point I wanted to add to is dealing with staff in meetings is very, very important. Very often you will get a better hearing from the staffer who isn't quite as preoccupied as the legislator might be on a given busy day when people are in and out of their office every 15 minutes. So it's really important that you treat the staffers seriously, that you educate them about the issues, and that you urge the staffer to make sure that the message that you're delivering is shared with legislators. So let me move on to the legislative program. The first bill that I wanted to talk to you about, and it's the highest priority of our effort this year, it's the Good Samaritan Act. Each meeting that you're going to attend will be approximately 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops, because you're usually pretty tightly scheduled, and the legislators are tightly scheduled in 15, 20-minute blocks, and then you have to have time to move to your next meeting. I would spend most of your time with the legislator focused on the Good Samaritan Act because it's our highest legislative priority, and we want to try to get it done in the next 2 months while the legislature is still in session. The Good Samaritan Act would provide liability protection for architects who provide essential services during natural or man-made disasters and emergencies. The key factor here in this bill is it's when an architect or an engineer voluntarily and without compensation acts. There's no better examples, and it works beautifully downstate and it works beautifully upstate, than Hurricane Sandy and, of course, the Lee and Irene storm, which hit upstate New York just as badly as Sandy hit downstate New York. So it's incredibly important that you give them context that in these natural disasters, when architects and engineers volunteer, it's very, very important that they be protected from liability. The important thing that you should also get out in each of the meetings is that the New York State Trial Lawyers Association has withdrawn their opposition to the legislation. They are the only known body that would have trouble limiting the liability of design professionals, and we worked out language with them last year so that they have withdrawn their opposition. So it's important, especially in the Assembly, to get that word across that on the Good Samaritan Act, the trial lawyers are not opposed to the bill. The bill has terrific sponsorship in both houses. Steve Engelbright has it in the Assembly and Kemp Hannon in the Senate. We expect the bill to move relatively soon after they get back from recess as part of a post-Sandy legislative package. They're going to put this bill in a package of bills that they're moving. As soon as they move it in the Assembly, all of our activity then needs to focus on the Assembly members to get the Assembly to take up the bill before they leave in June. On Lobby Day, we will give you a list of all of the sponsors of all of the bills that we care about, so that before you go into each meeting, as you pursue your schedule, you should have a sense of whether the particular legislator is a sponsor of bills that we care about. If they are, thank them for doing that, and if they aren't, ask them to go on as a sponsor and to support the bill in committee. That's particularly important that we do that with the Good Samaritan Act, so be sure to check the sponsorship bill list. The only reason why we haven't sent that out earlier is we want to make sure that that list is as up-to-date as possible. So we're going to prepare it right before Lobby Day, so you'll have it as you go around in your Lobby Day schedule. So again, please spend most of your time trying to sell the Good Samaritan Act, making the case for the Good Samaritan Act, and we hope that we'll be able to move that before they leave in June. The second bill that is in the
if I may interject for just a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Your point is well taken. Spend most of the time there on the Good Sam Act. I mean, you should try to limit your time to 1, 2, or 3 priorities, because the staff or the legislator that you're going to meet with is going to have a dozen of these meetings every day with different constituents who are all going to show up with their laundry list of things that they want them to do. So if you can walk away, so when you walk away, you want them to have in their mind the 1 or 2 things that are the most important to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. That's absolutely important. If we land up spending, about 10 seconds on each bill, you won't get your point across on the major bills that you care about. So I think that's a good point to emphasize that, Jeff. The second, and the bills are in relative order of priority in this presentation. The second bill is the Due Process for Design Professionals legislation. This bill would repeal a law that was passed in 2007, which gave the New York City Department of Buildings unilateral authority to revoke an architect's filing privileges. The bill basically undermined the entire system of professional licensure in New York State that was governed by the Office of Professional Discipline and the Regents, and it gave the New York City Department of Buildings unprecedented and inappropriate authority to pull a design professional's license. This bill is designed to repeal that law that was passed in 2007. We have sponsorship in both houses now. Senator Lanzer and Assemblyman Cusick have introduced the bill, and as we talk it up with legislators in both houses, we are getting a very positive response about legislators who essentially didn't even realize that this had been done, and are supporting our effort to try to have that law repealed. Let me just stop there. Any questions on either of those first 2 bills, and then I'll move on? Okay, design liability reform is the third. That's been in our package for a long time. It basically would impose a 10-year statute of repose, protecting a design professional from liability 10 years after a building was designed. Basically, it's based on the premise that sooner or later a building moves from a well-designed building to a well-maintained building, and the architect or an engineer no longer have control of the building and can maintain the quality of the building. We've been pursuing this bill for a number of years. We enacted a compromise on the bill with the trial lawyers approximately 10 years ago, but we've begun an effort to start to renew our effort to have design liability reform legislation passed. We now have the bill sponsored in both houses, and we have moved the bill up essentially in our priority list because we are starting to renew the effort to get this type of legislation passed. Qualifications. Go ahead.
I have a question. This is Paul
Sure.
Siegel. I have two questions about this. This is against third-party suits?
Yes.
And how do we get an actual copy of this bill to read it more carefully?
We can have that sent out to you. Mike, do you want to take that down and send it?
Yeah, you said this is Paul Siegel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, Paul.
Great. Thanks
Okay,
so much.
We'll get a copy of it to you, okay?
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, this is Laura
yes,
Cooney.
this is John Lusk. I'd like a copy, too.
Okay, John.
Okay, thanks.
You know what we'll do is we'll send a copy of it to anybody who was registered for the webinar today, Mike. That way.
That would be great.
That's good.
Also, this is Laura Cooney. Did anybody receive anything from a member who is now an emeritus member of Rochester regarding the statute of limitations recently? Mike,
Laura,
you didn't receive anything?
I personally haven't, no.
Okay, all right, because we just had a question about something that came up, and that, you know, an 85-year-old architect, a retired architect, who just had an issue with a project, and it's like, it was, I can't even remember how many years ago, but it was a building built many years ago, and now there's some litigation on the property and of course, or on the project, and of course they're, you know, going after anybody, and particularly anybody with insurance. So this is obviously a very real thing because it's, you know, it's happening to an 85-year-old architect who hasn't done any work in, you know, probably at least 10 or 12 years, and this project was done a long time ago. So
if you could get us the information on that, you know, it's kind of a good live example of what we're talking about. You know,
Yeah.
An 85-year-old who's now being sued for a building that he was involved in the design of, you know, X number of years ago. So
yeah.
if you could get that information to us, it would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if anything had happened with it. I had asked him to do that, but I hadn't heard anything, so that's why I was wondering if he did anything. So I will follow up with that again. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to move quickly through the rest of the bills, and then at the end I'll open it up to questions on any and all of them, but I don't want to belabor some of these because, again, you're going to be focusing on the bills that we've already talked about. QBS, a qualifications-based selection for design services. What this bill basically does is extend QBS procedures to public authorities and public benefit corporations. We've been trying to get this done for a number of years. The public authorities that it affects have generally opposed it. I think they think it's going to in some way change the world in which they work. I'm not sure that they really understand it, but we've had trouble getting this bill passed because it usually has substantial opposition from the public authorities. But again, we have sponsorship in both houses. We were able to get Senator DeFrancisco to put this bill in this year, so it is a viable bill that has sponsorship in both houses. The rehabilitation tax credit. This legislation is sponsored by Assemblyman Schimminger and Rasenhofer. They've had this bill in for a couple of years. They have advanced the subject in the budget process. In fact, the tax credit that was outlined in this bill was in the Senate version of the state budget. It wasn't included in the final budget that was enacted, but we do endorse the concept. The problem with it is that these types of tax credits get done in the context of the budget, or they don't get done. And if they do get done by both houses, generally the governor will veto them, saying that they should have been done in the context of the budget. So that's why this bill is in a higher priority, because we were working on this in the budget process, and it didn't make it in the budget process. The same holds true for the following bill. There's two different rehabilitation tax credits, one for commercial properties and the other one is for residential properties. And it also holds true for the issue of the historic preservation tax credit. Again, that's something that needs to get handled in the budget process, and it didn't happen in this year's budget process, but we continue to advance the subject. On the historic preservation tax credit front, we've been successful in passing a number of pieces of legislation to make the historic preservation tax credit more usable. Now the goal becomes to add to it, to increase the credit, to make it even more usable, because it's a very effective piece of legislation. Again, I'll go forward and touch on the bills that we oppose, because there are bills that continually pop up, including one that became more active very recently. The first bill is Assemblyman Simberwitz's bill that would require the Board of Regents to immediately suspend the professional license of an architect or engineer upon a determination that the Department of Buildings seriously abused the professional certification program. In the first place, we don't know what seriously abused means. It doesn't really have a good definition, and in fact, it differs with the professional malpractice language that's in the state education law. The bill also has a 5-year clawback provision. This bill has become more active because of a situation in Assemblyman Simberwitz's district, where he's concerned with a particular structure that is problematic to the community. This bill had been relatively dormant. We had worked with Assemblyman Simberwitz on fixing the bill, or at least holding the bill. He got more interested in moving it with this particular situation in his district, and we already have plans to go meet with him to see if we can alleviate some of his concerns, so he doesn't try to move the bill. The bill after that, the professional certification prohibition bill, would abolish professional certification programs in New York City. We very much oppose this legislation. Frankly, I don't think this bill has too much of a chance, because I think everyone understands what this would do to the construction process, especially in the city of New York, and so we're very interested in opposing the bill. So we should make clear to the legislators that we see that we oppose it. The construction threshold bill would raise the threshold from $20,000 to $50,000 for requiring design professional services. We've successfully opposed this for a number of years. The analogy I always use in arguing for this building is that you can build a very dangerous $20,000 alteration to your house. The public's health, welfare, and safety shouldn't be threatened by just raising the threshold. There are a number of bills introduced, including the couple that we have in the package, but there are others that usually pop up dealing with the interior design scope of practice. They usually try to, in some way or another, expand the scope of practice of interior designers, or in some way or another make the certified interior design title more relevant and thus more attractive, so that more interior designers will actually go through the process to become certified interior designers. We generally have been in opposition to bills that aren't focused on protecting the health, welfare, and safety, but just trying to make this particular profession's certification system more relevant. And I believe it's the last bill is the partnership agreements. This bill would allow the certified interior designers to enter into partnerships with architects, landscape architects, engineers, or land surveyors. The issue was essentially solved when we passed the corporate practice bill a number of years ago, which allows up to 25% of a design professional corporation to be owned by a non-design professional. So we largely think that this bill is moot. I'm going to come up for air there and see if you have any questions, to see if there's anything that I need to expand on any further.
Rich, this is Jeff. I'd just like to remind everyone to please mute your lines. We're getting some background noise from someone somewhere.
Any questions?
Hi, this is Paul Siegel again. I have a question. Two things. One, is there a way to get a printout of all these things that are showing up on my screen? And second of all, going back to the interior designers, this is something obviously of concern, to New York City about their role as being space planners and doing interior construction, which they say is non-structural but still has the potential for serious harm to public health, welfare and safety. Personally, I would, if this is close to their getting any kind of rights on this matter, I'd be really, I'd want to personally move it up on my list.
Paul, this is Jeff. Mike Burge he'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint, and actually, Mike, just distribute it to everybody else who's on the webinar, please.
The bill itself as well.
What's that?
I can send out the entire bill package, which corresponds with all the bills here.
Great.
If you guys want to review the entire bill, I will send out all the bills that we've listed here.
And Paul, we're going to have a handout when you arrive here in Albany on Lobby Day that's going to include all of this information on our legislative priorities.
Terrific.
I'll let Rich respond to the second part of your question.
Yeah, in terms of the interior design bills, we are aggressively opposing them, but it's better to spend most of your time on Lobby Day on issues that we are in support of. If you have time, I would get to the interior design bills and make it clear that we're in opposition. We have been successful over the years, as far back as I can remember, in opposing bills that are advancing interior design without proper justification. And I think we will be successful this year in opposing those bills.
Hey, Rich, this is Rick Stott. Laval is he's the sponsor of this interior design practice expansion bill. Is that correct?
That's right.
Senator Laval is my senator here in this area, and I have a perfect example to show him or to explain to him why this would not be a good idea. In 2009, we designed a centennial exhibit for the local hospital, and Senator Laval came to the grand opening of that thing, and he loved it. Now, a really good reason why an interior designer should not do work like that is because of the code issues involved in a project like that, including fire code and material selection and all of that, those kinds of things that really take a trained architect to know and not an interior designer. And I think he might be able to relate to that because he loves the project and supports it within the bounds of the hospital and has used it for fundraising and all kinds of things.
Good. You're going to be there on Lobby Day, Rick, right?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so we have a meeting scheduled with the senators, so we should emphasize that on Lobby Day.
Yeah, he will
again,
be able to relate to that.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
He'll definitely be able to relate to that specific project.
Terrific. One of the things you should do is you go through seeing who's sponsors of what bills, is identify sponsors of bills we oppose, and if you're in that particular legislator's office, you should speak to that legislator about why we're opposed to that particular legislation. You tend to try to organize your message based on what you know about the particular legislator. So in this case, we should definitely bring it up with Senator Laval because he's a sponsor of the interior design bill. Just so you know, I checked, and he put the bill in as a courtesy to the interior design profession. He has a strong affection for Ruth Linford, who has been lobbying the legislature, I think, since I was born. And there's a fondness for her in the building, and I think that he put the bill in as a courtesy in that regard. I think he knows that the bill as it's currently constructed has flaws.
That's good to know.
Do we have any other questions? Before we close today, I just want to thank Mike Burridge for really doing a great job in organizing this webinar. As many of you know, this was kind of my baby for the last couple of years, so I feel good that it's going to be in good hands from this point forward. Just a quick reminder, Lobby Day will be Tuesday, April 29th. Some things we're doing a little bit differently this year is that everything is going to be in room 711A of the Legislative Office Building. We'll have a continental breakfast available for you at 8:30, and then Rich is going to do a legislative update at 10:15, and this will give you a chance to also ask him some additional questions. If you have meetings beforehand, that's not a problem at all, but he will be on board at 10:15 to do a full legislative briefing. Our legislative meetings, of course, will run through the day, and then we're going to have lunch available for anyone attending in room 711A beginning at 1 o'clock. This is really important that you call your chapter and you let them know that you're attending Lobby Day. I think we've posted several times our Lobby Day coordinators, but make sure you call your chapter so that we can be prepared for you logistically, and so if you want to have lunch or a cup of coffee with us, we'll have them available to you. Also, for those of you, and this is really going to be for a number of our board members, staying at the Hilton Albany or the Hampton Inn, both of these hotels have parking. And then Mike has up on the screen now the visitors parking that is available right near the Capitol and also at the Empire State Plaza. The other thing that I do want to say a thank you to are the other members of Rich Leckerling's team, and that's Kate Herlihy and Aggie Leahy. Between the three of them, they work tirelessly on our behalf, and we certainly appreciate all the work that they do. Last reminder is that this year is the first Saratoga Design Conference, October 9th to the 11th. We're not doing a convention this year. We're doing a design conference. If you go to the AIA New York State website, you will see information on the design conference. And thank you very much. And Jeff, do you want to finish up?
I have nothing more to add except to say thank you to everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you all on Lobby Day in a couple of weeks.
See you then. Thanks.
Thank you.